This is a joint work with André Rojo and Radu Alexandropoulou. And as you said, this is a core project, an open core project one, associated with the core project one. And hence, it is pursuing the CP1 objectives, like create a time series of aligned high-resolution 3D models of plants using optical and 3D data from moving sensor platforms, and extract novel phenotypic features of single plants and their environment over time for better scientific understanding of the structural and functional dynamics of selected crops. Within CP1, we have different kinds of sensor platforms developed based on ground vehicle, which is pretty big, like about 2 by 2 by 2 meters, and also this flying robots. So with the flying robot, you have the opportunity to quickly cover a large area. So an entire field is visible if you fly high enough. And these platforms are equipped with 3D sensors like LiDAR, laser range sensors, or laser triangulation sensors. And they are also equipped with high resolution cameras. And yeah, in general, if you look at camera-based understanding of the environment, you have a 3D scene. And you may take an image of the scene, or you may render an image from that scene. And then, yeah, what you get is a projection, a two-dimensional image, or maybe multiple of these. And it's just a matrix of numbers. Yeah, so if you look at these numbers, they don't mean much. And the task of computer vision now is to, yeah, make sense of these numbers, to guess from these numbers how the world looks like. What kind of objects we have there, what kind of surfaces, what is the geometry, the 3D pose or shape of things, what is the appearance of things or material properties, and maybe also a semantic understanding of the scene. Unfortunately, computer vision is an ill-posed inverse problem. Yeah, so many 3D scenes result in the same image, and hence we need to incorporate additional constraints, knowledge about the world, inductive biases in order to make sense of such data. You can easily see that, for example, when you look at this image, that just is the brightness, the luminance that we measure. And if you look at these two edges, they actually have the same contrast. You may decompose such an image into a reflectance image that says, yeah, do we have a white or a dark surface, and a shading image, how much light is yeah, being shined at the different surfaces here. And the luminance results here with yeah, Lambertian surface by the product of the two. Yeah, reflectance times shading equal luminance, but you don't know which part is which. Yeah, if you, for example, here look at these two edges that have the same contrast, you may explain one by the difference in reflectance, and the second edge by the difference in shading at the two neighboring surfaces. But you look at the same contrasts here in a different context, and all of a sudden this is a shading edge, and this is actually a reflectance edge. Yeah, so the perceived geometry determines the perceived shading and reflectance. Yeah, if we have some image that we need to explain with some sort of model that we build from it, of course, we can come up with very specialist solutions. For example, here we have a canvas with different reflectances, and uniform lighting and a flat geometry. Yeah? Or we have that projection surface where we have flat geometry, we have the same reflectance but different lighting on it. Or we have a pretty wild geometry with uniform lighting and uniform reflectance that may also explain our measurement. But the likely explanation is simple, and it uses some prior knowledge about how the world works. Of course, image formation is somewhat more complex than just a Lambertian surface. Yeah, so surfaces can have different reflectance properties. Yeah, we may have a diffuse reflection, we may have a specular reflection, we may have even a mirror, and we can describe the complex reflection properties of a surface with a so-called bidirectional reflectance function. And that depends on from where the light comes, from where we view, and then the surface norm. Furthermore, it's not just happening at the surface. Yeah, so light is traveling also through the material, and all kinds of complex things may happen there. It may even leave the material at the other side. And then we have effects like transparency and translucency. Much of 3D reconstruction is based on image correspondences. Yeah, so we capture from our plant of interest images from different viewpoints, and we establish correspondences. So we find interesting points that hopefully reflect the same object part in the world, and we establish these correspondences by matching descriptors of these interesting points. And then, we can try to recover both where the cameras are and where these points are in the world from these established correspondences. Yeah, so when we have a point in a camera image, we don't really know how far away, if we assume this to be a point camera, and of course we can do camera calibration to make existing cameras look like a point camera, but we don't know if we see a point in a camera image, how far away it is. Yeah, so this point that we see in camera 1, is actually then moving along this so-called epipolar line in camera 2, and vice versa. Yeah, so if we observe this point here, it's moving along this line, so that both lines span an epipolar plane, and we must find correspondences along these epipolar lines. If we have enough of such correspondences, we can recover the transformation between the cameras up to scale and where our point is in the world. It may not always be perfect. Yeah, so it may be that we see a point in one camera and see a point in another camera, and these rays actually don't intersect. So then we can minimize the reprojection error in order to come up with a guess where the point is really in the world. So that is the basic principle that we follow here. But we now have not just in this ground vehicle, we don't have just 2 cameras. We have actually a camera dome with 20 high-resolution cameras, so that we can see a plant of interest here from different viewpoints with high resolution at the same time. And we can apply this finding correspondences and triangulation game in order to estimate camera parameters, including lens parameters and where the camera pose is. So where is the camera, in which direction is it looking? And we can recover a semi-dense 3D representation of the scene. But often this has gaps. Yeah, often there is occlusion, or we may have wrong correspondences and so on. So this is not a good 3D reconstruction of the environment. In recent years, novel view synthesis methods became popular for learning 3D representations of scenes. And the general idea is that we have some images of the scene from different viewpoints, and we have a mechanism that generates a novel view, an image from a different viewpoint of the same scene. And yeah, if that is possible, of course there is an if in the sentence, then we must have here somewhere a good model of the scene. So this model in these so-called neural radiance fields is a neural network. And this neural network has a very simple input. Yeah, it has a 3D coordinate, and it has the viewing direction onto one voxel. And then the neural network outputs a color, and it outputs a density. And yeah, here is like a million parameters that somehow represent the scene. And the method is very simple. It's volumetric rendering. Yeah, so we have a camera with a viewpoint. We have an image point here, and we follow this light ray here and sample multiple coordinates in this volume. And one coordinate then is input into this neural network along with the viewing direction. And it outputs some color and some density. And that is aggregated now so that we can render a novel pixel from a different viewpoint. So this beauty here is that this process is trivially differentiable. Yeah, so we shoot some ray, and we say, okay, the color that we produce is just a weighted sum of the colors produced by this neural network, and the weights come from the density along the way. So how much light is blocked earlier along the ray? So if we query a pixel that is behind a surface, then actually we don't know it, and it should not contribute much to the final color. And how much light is contributed by a small segment along that ray, and that is based on the density. Yeah, so where we have a high density, we believe the produced color. And now we can formulate a loss. Yeah, so this loss essentially says we want to reproduce the pictures that we have taken from our object of interest. Yeah, so we simply have here a reconstruction error, and this reconstruction error now is back propagated through this network so that this network can adapt its parameters such that the rendered images are as they once that have been captured. And many images usually are taken from different viewpoints so that like a 3D reconstruction of the scene can be learned. So this viewing direction dependence can be seen here. Yeah, so if we look at the same point from different directions, we may have different appearance here. Yeah, so this is the color distribution of the same point depending on the viewing direction. And so we can address non-Lambertian materials in this way. And usually this video should play. Okay. Yeah, so here you see some rendered novel viewpoints using this method. That is pretty realistic. One difficulty here is that it doesn't really give us geometry. It just gives us a color and photorealistic novel views. But yeah, signed distance functions are also a way to represent geometry. We essentially say in each of these cells, we store how far it is to the next surface and whether or not we are outside of the surface or inside of an object. Yeah, so that's why signed distance function. And we estimate with a sub-voxel precision the zero crossing of this function. That is then yeah, our guess where the surface is. And in addition to yeah, just the geometry representation that yeah, is done in this signed distance, so we actually make the assumption here that there is a surface, yeah, so that there is not just some fog or some semi-transparent thing, but that the color that we measure is determined by the surface that we hit. And yeah, in the second part of this network now, we predict the color that is also viewing direction dependent, and we query that where we think that the surface is. One trick to overcome a limitation of these neural radiance field methods that are quite slow to train is called instant neural graphics primitives. Has been proposed by Müller and colleagues at last year's SIGGRAPH. And the idea is very simple. We have in the volume that we query, we have multiple overlaid grids with different resolutions. Yeah, so the blue one is a coarse grid, and we have here a red finer grid. And then, yeah, we have coordinates for these corners that we pass through a hash function in order to look up features that are stored at these corners. And we interpolate between the looked up features in a bilinear in 2D or three linear way in 3D, so that we then have features that we can pass through a small neural network. And the small neural network now is much faster in training and much faster in inference than plain neural radiance fields used to be. So my PhD student Alex, he applied this idea of instant graphics primitives, but he proposed to not have a Cartesian grid, but triangular or tetrahedral, or in general permutohedral in ND lattice. Yeah, so there is two parts of that network. One part is for the geometry, so it predicts a signed distance function, and it also predicts features that are used here, in addition to features that are stored in this part of the color network. And yeah, in addition, we have yeah, the viewing direction, and we have the surface normal also as input to this small neural network that then outputs an RGB color, so that we can yeah, render novel views. And yeah, we have not so many parameters in this network. We can train it in a reasonable time, and yeah, we get now where's the video? Okay, sorry. Yeah, we can render quickly novel views of the scene that have a high level of detail in geometry and also in the texture and in the color spatial distribution. Of course, we yeah, apply this method to images that have been captured at Klein-Altendorf at the Phenorop Central experiment for different species of plants and at different points in time in this year. It was a bit difficult due to the wet weather, but you see here one reconstruction of a sugar beet plant. And yeah, I think that's pretty convincing, both in its geometry and color. We can capture the plants at multiple days and then essentially can watch them grow. If we want to convert such an implicit representation to an explicit representation that can be handled by any computer graphics pipeline, we can apply the marching cubes algorithm to this assigned distance function to find the zero crossing and recover a mesh. And we can then texture that mesh and optimize the colors to match the colors that we measured, so that we have a textured mesh that can be rendered in real time with any computer graphics pipeline. And of course, these pictures that we make, they are georeferenced, and from higher altitudes, the entire field can be captured. And from the ground, we are closer and can capture a high level of detail, both in geometry and in texture. The idea of this OpenCall1 project is to do essentially the same with such a small flying robot. Yeah, so this is just 250 grams. You can easily put this into your backpack, and that reduces a lot the logistic effort involved in capturing these images. Yeah, so you see here, I just stopped that, it's too quick, but you see here images captured around a plant of interest. So we fly in circles around that plant at different altitudes and make many pictures of the plant, so that we actually have an order of 10 more images per plant. And yeah, we did that at many days with different species, and apply a structure from motion to estimate all these camera poses and camera parameters. And we get sparse or denser reconstruction, but this is actually not really the representation that we want. Yeah, so here are some of these images that have been captured in this year from sugar beet at different points of the growth process, from soybean in different variants, from corn, from potato. And when we just apply this Permuto SDF method developed by Alex, this is how the reconstruction, the novel views rendered look like. Yeah, so I think that is reasonable. And we have that also for different kinds of plants here, for potatoes. But sometimes you may see here a little unsharp renderings that come from an issue that we have with this kind of measurement setup. And the issue is that we do not capture the images at the same point in time. Yeah, so with the ground vehicle, we trigger the cameras at the same point in time, and then we have a snapshot, and the plant doesn't move. But the 200 images are not captured at the same point in time. So there is movement caused by wind. And of course, also this little flying robot makes some wind. And that means there might be a blurry leaf reconstruction because the dynamics of the scene is not handled by this Permuto SDF. Yeah, so we actually assume a stationary scene there. But of course, one does not need to assume a stationary scene. So there is approaches like non-rigid neural radiance fields proposed by Dretsch and colleagues, where one has a representation of the scene that is called a canonical volume. So this is like the non-deformed representation of the scene. And then there is a ray bending network. And this ray bending network kind of deforms the volume. Or vice versa, if you shoot a straight ray through that deformed volume and send that through this ray bending network, you have this curved ray in the canonical volume where you can then look up certain features. The second part of this network is a so-called rigidity network that produces a mask that distinguishes between a stationary background and the moving foreground, and then this mask is multiplied here so that this deformation is just applied to the moving foreground. So this network, when you train it with the data that we capture from the flying robot, is able to model the motion in the scene, which should be mainly the motion of the plants. So ideally, the background here, the soil, would not move. Yeah, but of course, there is some regularization happening. Yeah, that means, of course, that this motion is not perfectly modeled. But if we model this motion, we can also compensate for the movement. So what you see here is actually the rendering of this canonical volume of the stationary scene representation, where this movement has been discounted for. And yeah, another aspect that we are working on in this project is to make the capturing process autonomic. Yeah, so in this growing season, you have seen that we placed that marker, but the drone was controlled by a human, which is actually quite difficult to fly around a plant in different altitudes and look to it with different angles and make good pictures. Yeah, so we try to make that process autonomous by using these markers. Yeah, so we learn a model of this marker ring, and then we define a coordinate system relative to it that is in the center of the plant. And then, we define trajectories around that and different radii, different heights, different gimbal angles to actually look at the plant. And then, use images that come from the drone live to find these markers, to estimate the relative drone pose, and then send control commands to it. And this already works, but here you see a test that has not been performed at the field, but in the Phenorob pavilion that you may recognize. Yeah, so we estimate where this drone is. We have this circle of waypoints that we try to fly to, and then capture the center from different angles and different elevations. So this is real time, and this is how it looks from the outside. Yeah, so this is accelerated a little bit, and it was a windy day. Yeah, so of course it doesn't work perfectly yet, because the drone has to somehow compensate for wind effects and so on. But you see that we can, in an autonomous way, circle around this point of interest. Yeah. In conclusion, we captured a large number of high-resolution multi-view images of plants on the field with ground robot, but also with this little flying robot. We have methods developed for detailed 3D reconstruction of geometry and texture. But I think there is a lot to do still. Yeah, so we need to incorporate plant knowledge to resolve ambiguities. Yeah, so at this point of time, the method doesn't really know that it reconstructs a plant. And it does not use images from all the other plants that we have captured. It just uses images of one particular plant, maybe 200 images. And of course, we should learn, prior how a plant looks like from the data that we have captured from 1,000 plants and maybe from other sources. For example, from this 3D data set, Pheno4D, that has been captured with a high resolution 3D sensors some years ago. And my objective is to not only model geometry and appearance, but also the structure. Yeah, so where is this leaf attached, and what is kind of the skeleton and building plan of the plant? And another point that we need to address is to establish correspondences of plant organs over time, so that we can see how they grow and develop. Yeah, so in this data set, this has been done. But for the data that we captured this year on the field, this is still on our to-do list. Yeah, with that, I would like to close and are looking forward to your questions.